my boss, who's a great guy, Fred, he's an entrepreneur as well. He gave me a call and said, "Do you want to start an accelerator from scratch?" And in 5 minutes, I was like, "Okay."
Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have Arushi on, and I'm excited because she just received an honor of being named 30 under 30 in one of Canada's up-and-coming tech cities. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about, your background and kind of what your professional career has been.
Sure. The short answer is I've hopped around a lot, but over time, no regrets. So I have a background in a liberal arts degree. So for those out there, entrepreneurs or people who've done corporate work, in the long term, a liberal arts degree works out, not in the short term. So I studied economics and English out in the States, and growing up, I lived in 7 countries. So my accent goes all over the place. And I picked my college by Googling it, and I'd never been to the States before. And I just show up in Poughkeepsie from Johannesburg with like no background. And that's kind of a theme throughout. After my degree at Vassar in the US, I did a similar thing where I cold called to get pretty much a consulting gig. I moved out here to BC. I had an offer in New York City, and I think, again, it's making these unconventional choices and hopping around. And then after my MBA, I had a bunch of consulting offers. And again, I chose to leave the corporate world with a lot of MBA debt and run my own consulting gig, because I thought I really was interested and I wanted to be brave in working on projects that put my values and put my interests at the forefront. I got an amazing exposure to the corporate world, but you get a whole variety, right? And I could focus on healthcare. And through that journey, I worked in a neuroscience startup that I still support. I've learned what it is to be not sure how you're gonna make next month's payroll, how do you sell to people as a 3-man operation to a large system. And most recently, I was asked to start a startup accelerator focused on a specific niche in healthcare, spinal cord injury. And the short and long of it was someone gave, my boss, who's a great guy, Fred, he's an entrepreneur as well. He gave me a call and said, "Do you want to start an accelerator from scratch?" And in 5 minutes, I was like, "Okay." So yeah, I think my career has been just a bunch of unconventional choices and saying yes to things I don't fully understand. And right now we've deployed our first cohort, run a very non-traditional accelerator. We're on our last month, and it's been an amazingly rewarding, grueling, challenging journey. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So there's a couple of things that you said that I just have to ask a little bit more. You said, okay, you've lived in 7 countries. So where was the first, what do you consider to be home now?
It's, most recently a few years ago, I was in South Africa because I grew up in Johannesburg, and that's where the accent sometimes changes. But I guess now I've lived in North America for 10 years. So I'm slowly sort of saying, okay, Canada, I guess Canada's becoming home. But I think when you've lived in different places, there's always this feeling that you never fully belong anywhere. And you're always, I don't know if you have this, but we're always code switching, right? Even in our own countries and own places, between the corporate environment, our social justice hat, our families, we're always code switching. And I think for me growing up, that was on steroids, because I'd be 6, I'd go from, or I think I was like 4, and from India, my parents took me to Egypt. And no one spoke English. All the little kids didn't speak English. And there were just 4 Mohammeds and me. And how do you adapt to that as a 4-year-old where you already have one language you don't fully get? And so I think for me, that experience of code switching and adapting is something we all talk about as entrepreneurs, but I think that happened pretty early for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it definitely opens you up to a lot of, I guess, to be a more flexible person. Because I know, when I was younger in my family, we lived in Germany for about 3.5 years.
Cool.
And then we came back to the US. Um, but it opened my mind to just, like I said, being comfortable being out of my comfort zone. And then
Mm.
when I was early in my corporate career, I took a job down in Brazil and I moved to Sao Paulo and I spoke absolutely no English.
Wow.
I mean, not
Yeah.
English. I spoke no Portuguese. I
Yeah.
only spoke English. And it's just like being there to where it's just like, all right, I am now out of my comfort zone. I've agreed to do this assignment for a year. I have to figure this
Wow.
out.
It's amazing. I spent 14 hours stranded in the Sao Paulo airport, and I was trying to
Oh,
get a
wow.
sandwich. So I can't imagine how you did a year of that, because it just makes you realize like how nothing knowing English is in some parts of the world, which is really good. And so congratulations on that. That's adapting.
Awesome, awesome. So when you talked about, your liberal arts background and just the constantly moving around, those unconventional decisions, I mean, I guess at any point in that journey, did you ever feel like, I'm not sure if this is the right decision, or concerned, or just feeling that sense of, hey, I'm not sure what to do next?
Yeah, totally. I think so. I think when going to business school was an amazing opportunity. But I think business school is a very interesting environment where, most folks are moving into very structured positions, and they're positioning themselves for that in big corporations. And I think though, MBA schools are adapting, and I was definitely exposed to a lot of entrepreneurship classes, but I never saw myself as any kind of entrepreneur. I was like, no, that's not me. And I think there was a time during the program, and I think it's actually important to have those breakdown moments where you feel very lost, and you are, following the crowd a little bit, even though your heart's not in it, because that's what you should do. And that's what you, with your privilege and your background, should do with an MBA degree. I should look for an even better consulting gig or a higher position. And it'd be funny, every few days in the MBA program, people I didn't know in the program that well would come up to me and ask me what consulting offer I was taking in a big firm. Like, they needed to know. And it's this culture we have where to feel okay with our decisions is this herd mentality.
Mhm.
So that was a definite moment where I think, it wasn't clear to me where I was going, and it was really jarring, because I have always tried we all try not to get sucked in, but we do. And I actually, called my mentor at that time, and I was like, I just felt completely lost. And she said, this moment, it needs to happen. And that moment of just being completely lost, sometimes you feel vulnerable because you're so lost, and you're lost in something you're failing at. You need that. And I think we fail every day. I think it's how we react to it, and letting it happen, and being open and honest about your failure, right? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't get into all the top tier consulting firms that the MBA wanted me to. I already had really good offers in a number of them, but I didn't get that top offer.
Gotcha.
But actually, overall, where I am now is so much richer and deeper in terms of my journey and aligned with my values. Not discounting that prestigious, shiny thing, but that wasn't for me. But I think going through that journey and realizing what isn't for you is really hard.
I think, yeah, that's something that you said. It definitely is I think if I can like just sum it up to my own experience with that vulnerability, it's,
Mm,
I mean, like I said, when you feel like you should have a plan of what to do next.
mm,
When I was leaving my corporate job,
yeah.
people were asking like, oh, what are you going to do next or whatever. And
Mm,
it's like, and what I began to realize is it wasn't like they were just asking because they absolutely just had a blank slate, because some people already had in mind what they thought I should do next.
exactly. So interesting, right?
Hmm. And it made it even more interesting, because they would ask, what are you going to do next? And then they would immediately jump into their spiel about what they thought that I should do next. And it's like, wow, I can see how the pressure can be very high on people to step out of their comfort zone and to, like I said, go down a path where they don't know
You
exactly
don't
how it's going
know.
to turn out. And so it's like, even like with this show, the Business Talk Library, one of the things that
Mm,
I tell people is that I have no idea what the next 5 steps look like right now I'm kind of focused on what's the next step. And as I continue to do that, you know, the rest of the path will become clearer, but it may come clear like one step at a time.
And I think this mentality, because I work in, my background was in consulting, is in strategy. So I want to know the plan 5 years from now. But what you just said is so powerful, especially for the moment we are in now in terms of, the movements we're having around how we're reacting to this pandemic, right? And then also the Black Lives Matter movement. I think there's just so much information and it's overwhelming and it's painful. Yeah. And these movements don't allow us to have, like you can have a 5-year plan, but really we don't know how our reality is going to look like. So I think taking it day by day and saying, how can we show up every day and do the thing you committed to doing, and the thing that you think is right, and the thing you think is equitable. I think it's very necessary, and it's very counterintuitive, at least the way I want to think about things, is if I try and think 3 months from now, okay, what is the world going to look like? Are these changes going to happen? Is systemic racism in, certain areas going, you can't, but what can you do today as a person and an entrepreneur? And just, how do you deal with that complexity? And I think that day by day and being honest that you don't know is really powerful and hard to practice. It's not paralyzing. It doesn't mean you don't do anything. It means you do something, but you're not making these grand plans on what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that I think a flavor of that is something I've consistently heard when doing the interviews. I mean, because we're doing 8 to 10 interviews every single week to where I'm talking to different entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I find to be very interesting is a lot of them talk about in their journey is just learning how to focus on the niche of, hey, what exactly were they offering, and being very clear on how to focus and not get distracted. So speaking of that, when you went into this incubator business, I mean, focusing on the spines, like how did you feel about that? Like, okay, all right, this is what my focus is. Like, how did you feel about that?
And it's so distracting because, incubation, acceleration, people love these buzzwords and people offer you all these things. And it's like the funnel of information is endless. And I really believe, I think from the startup world, is like rapidly prototype and pick what is going to be a differentiator, like exactly what you were saying. And so, first of all, we got a lot of feedback. This is an orphan condition. Running an accelerator for this will never succeed. You're a charity. Right now, charities hired you to do this work. They don't know what they're doing. I'm not saying it was that negative, but it was that negative. Behind closed doors, people are just, they haven't seen it. So if they haven't seen it, it's not going to happen. So I thought, what are the 2 things we can do better than other accelerators? And that is bringing, people with lived SCI experience, because we're networked with that, like the actual consumer. Not to just give feedback to the startups, but mentor them throughout the process. So you can talk to a consumer several hours a week instead of, that one time I talked to the one consumer, so that you're actually embedded with the needs of the consumer. Very few accelerators do that. And the second thing is, having worked in healthcare startup and being run a pre-seed company, really focus on what the biggest risks are, and that's regulatory and reimbursement. So how could we de-risk that or bring the best resources and remove some of the costs? But we took out all the fluff around, my boss and a few others, they wanted us to add all this stuff around general building a business plan. And I said, no, that's what other people are doing. They do it better than us. Let's just cut all of that out. And that was a risk, because people said, you don't know an accelerator. Why are you doing that? But I think it paid off.
Okay, awesome, man. I think that becomes a very clear thing that distinguishes people from who start to see that deeper level of success and that deeper connection, or I guess you say awareness of their customers and the audience that they are actually after. It's when they can actually intentionally put those blinders on. So in doing that, what are and I know you alluded to some of it, so what are the services that your company offers?
Yeah, so at Praxis, we're running right now an accelerator program for companies that have an application for spinal cord injury, but their market can be big broader, but they need to show that people with SCI could benefit from their technology. And we bring them now for a virtual 3-month program, and we have people with SCI mentoring them. We have world-class researchers advising them on the type of research they need to do. We connect them with world-leading clinicians in the space. We give them about 50K in Canadian in terms of grant money. We bring regulatory and reimbursement specialists to help them go through those hurdles around their strategy, both in the US and Canada, to help them with market entry in those 2 countries. And we bring, a in-house business entrepreneur in residence. The whole program is run by 3 of us who are all entrepreneurs. So what in some form or have some experience. So I think that we're not just coordinators. So when a startup talks to us, it's really funny how we engage on top of all the services, because I've sat there and not known how to make payroll next month, or made very difficult decisions, or then you have a different type of conversation. So we're always there as sounding boards, and the authenticity you can bring by saying, I understand how this feels. This is horrible. Okay, let's sit with that. Versus someone who's never had any experience of going through that. Then you just become a coordinator. You're not actually a sounding board and a person who's really invested in each of these companies. So I think that the magic factor at the end is that kind of packaged together service we provide of actually understanding a little bit around the journey and being sounding boards and being kind of unconventional pseudo peers for each of these companies on top of that.
Awesome. And where can people find you online or find you on social media?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn like everyone else. So Arushi Raina. And I also have a Twitter profile, Arushi 101. I am a fiction writer, so you'll see a lot more around my creative writing and novel work. But yeah, it'll be great for anyone to join me and share the journey.
Awesome. And before we get to the last question, I have to ask the experience or the honor of being on the 30 under 30 list. What is that like for you?
It's funny in this age of not having a crowd of people to celebrate with. So it's a lot of LinkedIn notifications. But besides that, my main reflection was in seeing all this play out is I actually didn't know I had got it. Someone emailed me. And throughout all these engagements, it has been consistently people lifting me up. And people who, met me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, early in my career, and they're them engaging in such an authentic manner with me, with this very personal messages around what our interaction was, has just made me so grateful of the village of people I've had interactions with, and the quality of those interactions that people understand and have followed my journey in their own ways as leaders, as peers. I don't think everyone has that in their career or in their world, where there's so many people lifting you up, and the whole experience has been other people lifting me up. Like one of my friends found out and posted on LinkedIn, and the poor guy, he's got like, I think like, I don't know, hundreds of notifications every day dinging off, and he didn't even like realize it's going to explode. Nothing's on my feed because everyone is just, without me doing anything, like propel that engine. And I think I'm just so grateful because not everyone has that. And now it's my responsibility to say, how can I do the same in any small way that I can think of.
Awesome. And before we wrap up, the one question that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, what are 2 things that you have learned kind of in your entrepreneurial journey, and I guess your pre-entrepreneurial journey, that you come to understand, like, hey, this is something that you need to know to be successful as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So 2 things. One is actually a fellow entrepreneur, when I was getting mentored by him, said, you will have a business as long as you're prepared to change. Wow. And I thought that was really powerful, because I think at that time we were running out of money, and I was like, he didn't bring money up at all. And it's not because he didn't know what that felt like, right? Or capital. He said, you will have a business as long as you're able to change. So I try to use that as a very centering thought, because I think it's so easy to get rigid and think there's a right way to do about things, especially if you've got a confirmation bias. When certain things have gone well so far, it's you only are as successful as your ability to change. And the more we think about that and the more we embed that in our practices, I think can only be better, especially in turbulent times. The second thing I learned is, kind of like you go through a ringer of learning technical skills and really focusing on, oh, if I do this analysis well, this, and that's really important. Like, I don't think any of us would be where we are without some of the technical rigor. But more and more, I think emotional self-regulation is the magic ingredient in growing anything or nurturing any business. And it was a really hard learning for me, because you want to say, oh, I have the solution, it's right. That's not what it's about. It's how do you have self-mastery and grace in difficult conversations, in negotiations, in, as unfortunately, as a woman of color, every week I'll have a unwanted comment. Well, especially because I'm a little bit younger than everyone else in the room, I have unwanted comments. And before, you react in a place of fear, or you want to, but, you have to think beyond that. Even though that person could be wrong, how do you self-regulate, and how do you bring your best self in very difficult situations? How do you, practice that? And I think that's what I'm interested in growing in. So I meditate almost every day. And I think it's been life-changing, like that self-mastery. And it's a huge journey, and I fail, like I get irritable, but like, how can I keep working on that? So those are two things I keep as daily reminders.
Awesome. Well, I definitely thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for, taking the time to be on the show. We really do appreciate you sharing your journey with us and the insights and the wisdom, because I absolutely agree. I think that all the things that you have brought up, I think, are very great points and things that the audience needs to hear, and entrepreneurs just, I guess, need to get comfortable with the things that you say, because they are a challenge of processing those and accepting those. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Thank you so much for having me and amplifying other voices. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.